We'll start the show in just a minute, but first, a word from our premier brand sponsor, Boom.
I'm Benjamin Vale, and I'm the owner of Hospitality, and we are a short-term rental and mid-term rental management company in Columbus, Ohio. We manage about 140 furnished listings, mostly in Columbus, but also some in Cincinnati and surrounding cities around Columbus. Before I started using Boom, some of my pain points were that my owners would have all of these questions. There was an owner statement, but none of the information that they were looking for was on there. What I was able to find with Boom was actually a system where all team members can share the same information, whether they're owners or maintenance folks. I was excited to see the transparency that was provided through the owner portal of not only the revenue, but also the performance metrics and photos and videos from maintenance tasks and a property by property P&L that was updated to the day. When I saw what Boom has for processing reviews from guests, I realized it was a game changer. It basically allowed AI to do all of the heavy lifting on almost all of that. The AI is able to gather all of the data points, whether it's a positive or a negative mention, and easily create a task and schedule it to address any issues. With Boom, we're able to see a lot more financial metrics, and we're able to track more in real time cash on cash returns and annual returns and things like that. I would refer Boom to colleagues and friends. The main reasons are the time savings, and they're always developing with the new technology that's available to stay up with what technology is going to be able to help your business next.
Head over to boomnow.com to see a demo of this revolutionary software, and be sure to include that you heard about Boom on the Alex and Annie podcast. Our listeners receive 50% off onboarding fees, and the first month is free. Go to boomnow.com and see for yourself how AI is revolutionizing the future of property management systems. Welcome to Alex and Annie, the Real Women of Vacation Rentals. I'm Alex.
And I'm Annie.
And we are joined today with a longtime good friend, Rebecca Ballart, who is the COO of Rev Research. Rebecca, so great to see you today.
Thanks, guys. It's always a pleasure to hang out with both of you. I enjoy it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're so excited to have you back. Can you give everybody just a little refresher about what you and Rev Research does?
Absolutely. So we are a revenue management consulting firm. We work with companies all across the world, actually, and help with not only full service revenue management, but we do help on the consulting side. And in the last couple of years, we've started a hybrid. So it's not necessarily just full service, but we come in and actually train your team and help implement revenue strategies for every single unit you manage.
Awesome. Well, and we were just recently, the three of us were down in South Walton, 30A area in Florida for the Favor Florida Alliance Vacation Rentals. They had a local chapter event, and it was held at the sheriff's office. And I remember when we got invited to this, we thought, this sounds like a setup, but it ended up not being. And honestly, that was such a fun morning. We were there for, few hours, I'd say, but it was a great smallish meetup, but a great crowd and very participatory in the questions, and just had a great conversation. We actually had you up on stage and we did a live interview talking about all things to do with revenue management, but then also how that really plays into homeowner communications and just best practices, direct bookings, guest experience. And we probably could have gone on and on for hours sitting up there. But to kick it off, I think we want to kind of have that same conversation because it was such a good one. And unfortunately, we didn't record it. But kind of to kick us off, like maybe just kind of give a quick snapshot of what you're seeing in the markets that you operate in and what's going on in the world of revenue right now.
Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say that 2024 has been a battle. It has been tough for some markets, whether that's due to number of supply increase in the last couple of years, softening demand, more options for the guest in terms of international travel, cruises, all of those things kind of have come into play of what this past summer peak season has been. I think a lot of people had a little bit higher expectations in terms of where they were going to end up revenue wise. And I think the biggest takeaway, honestly, is if you were able to kind of recognize some patterns early and follow the data and make some adjustments pretty quickly, you ended up having a pretty good year. Some people that tried to hold higher rates longer really didn't see that payoff. And so now, as we're kind of going into fall, we're having some really tough owner conversations of, July in the Panhandle was pretty rough in terms of what it normally does. And so when you have an owner that's expecting the most money that they make in that month and not coming close to that or being a little behind, you've got to make that up somewhere else. And as we're going into fall and a slower time, the demand's not exactly there to make up a ton of revenue as you're going into a little bit of a softer time. But I think it's time for everyone to kind of reset, take a real deep dive into what actually happened. What did you do? What did you not do? What did you wish you did? There's a couple clients, and I know I called him actually before this, and I was like, "Can I say your name?" Because Eric with Current Tides, he's in Gulf Shores, and it's so funny, like how this world is so small. We live down the street from each other, and connected when I was on the podcast about a year ago. He's like, "Wait a second." But for Eric, he's in a very dynamic, saturated market in Gulf Shores, and we saw some stuff very early on, made some adjustments that was like, hey, we feel good about these rates compared to what other people are trying to charge. It looked like he was underpricing. And we just did a recap the other day and it was like, oh my gosh, like you crushed the market in occupancy, you crushed it in RevPAR, you actually even ended up getting more in ADR. And it was like, if we wouldn't have made those decisions when we did, would the results have been the same? I don't know. And so it's like he gets to go to the homeowners and say, hey, we were proactive. We ended up coming out ahead because we made these decisions. And this is why you trust us and our team. That's one of many examples, but there has been some other ones that aren't great examples. And they're tougher conversations, but it's like, okay, let's dust ourselves off. Let's take a real look at what happened and let's not repeat it next year, because unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on what side of the coin you are, 2025 is looking to be pacing pretty similar to 2024. So if you had a good 2024, great. That's awesome. Good for you. Like that's keep in mind what you did. If it wasn't, then let's have the tough conversations of what happened, what went wrong, and let's fix it now in August or now September for next year so that we can kind of get ahead of that and not repeat the mistakes of this year.
So leaning into that, tough conversations. And I think everybody, the big buzz right now is everybody's talking about like their Enneagram and what their personality types. And we have these conversations a lot lately. And I am a classic conflict avoider. Like I would kick that can down the road, but I know that the further I kick that can down the road with an owner, the worse it's going to be. And it's a full on war. So how do you set your team up to have these conversations? And again, it's not that anybody did necessarily anything wrong. It's just there's just so many dynamics at play that unless you're really, really paying close attention, most companies don't have a person to keep the eye on the ball, but they still have to have these conversations. So how do you suggest people go about teeing that conversation up and actually having it?
Yeah. So I think from the very beginning, you have to have a stream of communication, whether that's email or I've had some clients that do like a Loom video to the owners, because when the owners are hearing from you consistently, they know that somebody's looking, someone's watching out for them. When they don't hear from anyone for a few months, it's like that's when those kind of scaling mean emails come across, because
Yeah, yeah,
what are you doing? You're just all hanging out at the beach and I'm
yeah.
losing money, and it's like usually head
Exactly.
in property management. It's like, I live at the beach and I haven't been there one time this year.
Yeah.
Right.
So, that's not the case. So it is taking those small moments. I tell my clients all the time, I'm like, celebrate the wins, not only with your team, but with your owners. We've been pulling, how many check-ins did you have this summer? How many states did these families represent? How many, silly things, hot tubs waters did you change? Like something, like all of we have the data and we have these numbers, but sharing that with owners, because then they go, oh, wow, that team, they saw 10,000 check ins from 34 states. and they accomplished 15,000 work orders. Oh, everyone, they're taking care of my place.
Mhm.
Like they've got a
They are
lot going
busy.
on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's why they didn't answer my text message, phone call, and email all at the same time that I sent them,
Right,
Yeah,
like
sure.
exactly.
on a
Yeah,
Saturday during check-in time.
Right.
yeah. I think
Yeah.
the transparency issue, that's kind of the main thing behind all of this, and depending on what system you're using, sometimes that can be more difficult than others, but the more that you can show and communicate with your owners of the things that you're doing, that you're not even charging. I mean, if you're going out and just doing something to do it, put a work order in. It doesn't have to have money associated with it, but then whenever you do have to charge them for something, they're not thinking, "Oh, man, you're nickel and diming me," because they've already seen you've done a lot of stuff that you haven't charged them anything for. But yeah, it's tough, and I like the idea that you mentioned about the Loom video, and I've seen some companies do that, and they send out either in a, email newsletter or it could be in their owner portal. But I think that's a really good way to do it, and sometimes that's just easier to do. It's more personal, it's easier to do than sitting down and writing a long, perfectly written newsletter copy, but it at least, you can get your point across and they remember that it's you as a person, not just a business owner behind the screen. So definitely recommend that for companies if you're trying to figure out how to communicate with the owners.
So, coming off of the tough conversations, one other area that I've been hearing a lot about is, again, the influx of inventory that happened in all of these markets. And that's good and bad. There's a lot more players in the market. There's a lot more ability to kind of diversify your inventory if that's what you want. But one of the things that I think is really reared its ugly head, especially now, is that there were people that, again, bought at the height of the market. They got projections from management companies that really had no business projecting because they were new. And then there was realtors, and again, not to throw the realtors under the bus. This is not what that's meant to be. It's just people that didn't have the data to really make solid projections, and they over projected. And so now you've got owners on your plan who are new to the business. They've never been through the ebb and flow of the market, and so now they're like, well, wait a minute, they're in a panic. I paid too much. I'm not making enough. I was told this. I was told that. Those are the really hard conversations to have because it's almost a no-win situation. So you almost get in a scenario of like, it's time for us to break up. But before you get to the breakup, how do you talk to them about what it looks like to project when, again, we're coming off of COVID and that just upended projections overall, just upended the way we think of revenue management. But how do you address that with an owner?
Yeah, I think the elephant is that we don't talk a lot about in the industry is projections, because I will probably die on this mountain is projections are probably one of the hardest things we do. And the reason being is someone go, well, Rebecca, that's not, don't you work with data? Shouldn't it be easy? And it's like, well, in theory, yes. However, there's so much that goes into a projection, just like what we were talking about supply. So you have, Branson, Missouri is a great example. 2 years ago, they had seven, bedroom homes. They maybe had 20 in the whole market. In the last 2 years, they've had two large developments that have come out with over 300 for, I think one is 300 homes, one's 500 homes of all five, six, seven-bedroom homes.
Wow. Oh
Mm,
my gosh, that's a
That
huge growth.
changes
wild.
drastically because you
Yeah.
have projections that were in the height of COVID in these large homes that everyone could bring their family to and
Yeah.
quarantine and spend time together, to then now I literally have 200 other options all competing in a couple mile radius. And I mean, no shame. Branson's a great market. It is thriving. It's doing well, but there's only so many people going to Branson. Like
Mhm.
they're
Yeah,
that want
exactly.
to sleep. Some of these homes sleep. We always joke. I'm like, are we pricing hotels? No, it's a
Right,
house.
yeah.
Okay, sleeps 50 people. That's kind of like a small hotel. So it's those type of things go into projections. If you have a storm that happened and it took out a lot of the inventory. Maui's another great example. A projection in Maui is so tough right now because you have some inventory coming on, you have some going off, you have some that have converted to long term for residents. You have, just there's so many environmental factors that go into projections that is really tough. And no diss to real estate agents, but when they do projections, they base it kind of how they price a house. Well, for us in the vacation rental market, there's a lot more factors there. How much is the owner going to use it? How much, are we really going to be able to rent? Are there HOA restrictions that require a certain amount of nights? If it is a 7-night minimum in a very traditional beach market, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough because there's a lot of other options that don't require 7 nights. So that is going to be a hit to the revenue. I think also the other hard part that we don't address enough is year 1 projection versus 2 on. Year 1 is always the toughest year because you're getting all those OTA listings going, you're getting reviews, you're getting the photos, depending on when a house is coming on the market. This year I was just really blown away with how many of our clients were onboarding in the middle of summer. That
Yeah.
never happens. That
Yeah.
is bizarre, but,
Yeah.
is for owners that were coming to them going, "Well, my calendar's blank, I don't have anything to lose." I'm like,
Yeah,
"What?"
exactly. If they wanna save the fall, it's
Like,
shortchanging.
Right.
that's
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
okay. That you
yeah,
should be having full calendars right now. Well, how fast can we get our team to onboard this to get you, any little bit of summer? And so I do think that the time of the year also plays a role in it. It's how fast we can get it ready if it needs any, improvements or anything like that. So the other thing is using market data to create those projections, but market data is really tough. And I think as we get access to more data, it gets harder because there's so many variables. So even when you're, setting rates or things like that, I've become a huge advocate of using your own portfolio as a benchmark because you know how you distribute your rates. Are you rolling your fees in? Are you distributing them separately? How is that being pushed out? What does your channel markup look like? All of those things, when you're looking at these other properties online, you don't know the backstory to what that owner's actually taking home. What is their commission split? All of those things go into that, and I don't think we really think about that. We just go, "Oh, the market average is $300 a night, so I better put my house around $300." And it's like, well, average, some could be a lot higher than 300, some could be a lot lower. If this home's already struggling, it doesn't need to be at 300.
Wouldn't you say, though, I mean, you've been in Gulf Shores for a very long time. I've been here in Myrtle Beach, Andy's been in Panama City for a long time, and I think, like, not that any of us are property managers, but when you've worked in a market for a long time, and it's a lot of these, the inventory, especially in the condos side, that you can give the property managers, the companies you go to can give a pretty accurate projection that's gonna be better than what the data is gonna show because the data could be more skewed. But I feel like it's just best to rely on the property managers themselves and, really not get whatever the realtor tells you, but verify back. But I've seen it go both ways too, that sometimes the property managers, they don't have that market data for that type of accommodation. And they are, just looking at what they can get externally. And it's been way off. I mean, I talked to a homeowner earlier this year that they had projected well over $100,000 in rental income, and he wasn't even in the tens. So, I mean, that's a massive difference, and, it's scary, but I think, one important thing to keep in mind too is as you come towards the end of the year, I mean, this is really and you should be thinking about this before the end of the year, but as your guests are staying, you need to be doing things to get them to rebook for next year, whether that's a reduced deposit policy. We used to always do a $99 deposit to reserve the property, the balance of the deposit due, within 30 days. So it's like you get them on the hook. It's non-refundable, but like you've got them in there and then continuously follow up to make sure that they complete the rest of the deposit. But going into the new year, it's super important to get those early bookings on the books, whether it's rebooking people that are here or planning for now heading into the fall. Like, what are we going to whether it's Black Friday sales or Cyber Monday sales or Thanksgiving sales or Christmas sales, like what are you doing to prepare ahead of time so that those owners have bookings already on there that they're not gonna think about changing, in next summer because they're like, "Okay, I've already got a good amount of bookings at this point." So, it's a lot to think about, but I think the owner education is probably as important as the property manager education that we seek to provide, but
We did, bounce back coupons, and I was talking to somebody recently that I said, "Well, what are you doing for your repeat or, getting people to come back again?" They were like, "Oh, well, we put our rates up at the beginning of the year, and then we'll send an email out." And it's like, "Well, you have them right at the property. Like, why are you not putting something in the property to say, like, rebook, and here's a discount for the next booking, whether it be in the fall or the winter or the spring or whatever next year. And people are like, oh, I don't want a discount next year. But again, if you get that base on the books, like you can go take your rates up.
You position it as a discount, but it's 10% off next year's rates, which
Right,
are
which are
already
already
higher,
which
right?
should
Yeah.
be up by
Yeah.
15% anyway. But I think again, it's getting people in that mindset of thinking long term. And I think that that's the problem is people have been about the short term grab. It's like I can get it now and get it now, and then they forget like, oh crap, and then all of a sudden you're sitting here like we felt in the Panhandle and most everywhere last year. April came upon us and the bottom fell out, and everybody was like, well, how did this happen? Those of us who were watching it were like, you guys need to pay attention. But it's just getting people in that mindset that you need to have a strategy that looks out more than just a couple of months at a time. But also to your point, going back to like communicating with the owners, make sure that they're aware all along the process, and it'll save you from having those really tough conversations if you're doing that.
We'll be back in just a minute after a word from our premier brand sponsor, OwnerPoint.
My name is Talia Lockard. I am the Director of Sales and Marketing at Hostiva. We have about 6,000 properties, 2,000 we full service manage, and about 4,000 we co-host. We've been using OwnerPoint, I want to say, for almost a year now. We're in a lot of markets, right? So teaching each team member how to go source new leads and how to do acquisition and business development could be challenging. So previously we've done things very, very manually prior to using OwnerPoint, and OwnerPoint has made this automated for every market. So OwnerPoint really cut down the time that it took us to do it. Not only the research that it took, but the ability, I want to say we have like 10 plus markets in there to get our team members in it very quickly and utilizing it. It was not difficult at all to implement in our operations, which is what we look at in a software. It was very fast. I would say we talked to the team, and within a week, we had someone on a phone call, we had logins, and we had almost like 1 or 2 trainings set up with different variations of our team members. It was a very quick onboarding and very quick ramp up time in getting started. The tangible benefits that we've seen since using OwnerPoint is obviously increase of time in our workers, right? So, we've gone from essentially maybe only sending a couple hundred letters a week to be able to send about thousands of letters in each area. It's also given us the ability to kind of bring sales and marketing together in a way that we weren't able to do before. I would absolutely recommend OwnerPoint to others, and I have to say I do very, very often because we use it a lot, and it is a tool that works for us. If you were really like, I don't know where to go, I don't have the team, or I don't have the time, or someone who wants to do a lot of data and research, OwnerPoint is really just a more than amazing answer for you.
Ready to start growing your inventory and bringing in new properties? Head over to ownerpoint.io/Alex and Annie to see how they can help your business thrive.
That's ownerpoint.io/Alex-and-Annie, where you can turn leads into long-term relationships and grow your property management business. Now back to the show.
But I wanted to ask you, just based on this year and the conversations that you've had with your partners, what are other things that people could be doing while guests are in-house to enhance that experience so that ultimately, again, they may not come back to the same market year after year like people used to do, but they're going to recommend you. So what can they be doing? I mean, do you think it's about the rate, or do you think it's going back to that tried and true like guest services?
Yeah, it's absolutely hands down guest experience. I mean, you think about that added value. I mean, if you think about even, not even using a short-term rental example, but you use a restaurant. If, my husband and I want to go out for a nice steak dinner and we want to go and we go, hey, we want to spend a little bit more money because it's our anniversary, and we go to this restaurant with high expectations. We know we're going to pay more. We're expecting a high level of service. We're expecting for the food to be excellent. We're happy. We tell everyone, oh my gosh, we tried this new restaurant. It's wonderful. I don't have those same expectations when I go through the drive-thru at Starbucks. Like, I'm getting my food, I'm getting it fast, and I'm going. I know that's kind of a silly example, maybe a smaller example of, fast food restaurant. You're not going to have that same expectations and that same brand loyalty about spending your anniversary at Chick-fil-A. I mean, maybe, but it's not. I mean, if that's your deal, that's great. But I think you have to have the guests understand if they're paying a little bit more money, or you want to push that ADR in summer, like there has to be a perceived value there. It has to be that they know what they're paying for. So if your branding is you're a luxury home brand, then everything from the moment that that guest books with you to the moment they leave has to have that level of luxury on it. And that's looking, we were talking before the call, is like, this is a great time of the year to do a audit of your communications. What is that looking like? Are you educating the guests on how to book direct? There's so many new guests coming into vacation rentals for their first time. They don't know. They don't know that you have a website. They don't know that they can save a ton of money by booking. So it's all about that education, where you might feel like, oh my gosh, we're saying this so much, everyone knows, but they don't. And so we have to give them a reason to come back and use you over and over again. And then, like you said, making sure they're leaving happy so that they're then going to telling their friends, oh my gosh, we had a great trip. We stayed at this place. It's awesome. Hey, by the way, if you go, book direct because you can save money. And I actually had to pay a booking fee on an online site. But if you don't, then everyone shares that kind of information. Like, even in social media, that's becoming more popular with some of these like travel bloggers and just different things. It's like, it's one of my family members was like, is this real? And it was like a TikTok reel of someone that was like, how to save on vacation rentals. And I was like, you guys, this is not new. This
Right.
happens all the
Yeah.
time. Like,
It's just
yes,
in their face now.
this is what
Yeah.
I do all the
Right.
time. That is where society's at. We can't just assume that everyone knows and everyone knows how to book direct. So we have to make that flow easy, and we have to make that communication clear, and that guests feel good. And then they do want to rebook when they're at the property of, oh my gosh, this was such a nice vacation. If it's a vacation from hell, no, they're not going to want to book again. They're going to want to go out of here. We're going to go somewhere else next time. So it's just creating that relationship and that brand loyalty is really important, especially as supply is increasing and there's new companies popping up and they're growing very fast. There's a lot of new companies and a lot of traditional vacation markets that are just exploding because they are doing the things that we're talking about today. They are having those conversations from the beginning. They are clearly explaining their expectations. They're not afraid to challenge the norm, and they're shaking stuff up. And it's really cool and really exciting to be a part of some of those companies that are coming into those markets, and watching their success because they're just challenging the norm. And it's really interesting to kind of see that play out.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, to your initial point of taking the time during this time of year to really look at that audit of what the guest communication flow is, that's one of the things that I do with all of my clients now. And it's a very interesting experience because you almost always uncover things that are going out, things that are being said that you don't want to be said, that the timing is wrong, that there's overlap. And when you think about it, when a guest books on whether it's Airbnb or on your direct website, in a lot of cases, they're getting your booking, a booking receipt that just has like, this is confirmation you paid. Then the next is a confirmation, a true confirmation email. Then the next is the rental agreement that they've got to log on somewhere else to sign. And then it continues. And so it's like if they've also booked through a channel, they're going to get something from that too. And by the time that you actually arrive at the destination, I know this happens to me all the time. I'm like, I don't even know which one of these emails I need to be looking at, but like, just give me the clear, concise information. But this is a really good time of year to look at that and make sure your staff understands, like, there are some nuances between if somebody books on an OTA versus on your own, but like really map it out. I mean, use a spreadsheet, use a piece of paper, a bill or a whiteboard, whatever makes sense. And it doesn't have to just be marketing people that go through this exercise. It actually would be, I think, really helpful to have a reservationist go through the exercise so they see too. And then you can figure out, okay, does it make sense? Should we be adding something different? Should we be texting them here? Should we be calling them? Like whatever the case may be. But you've got to look at that data of, if you're getting a million inquiries from people the night before they're supposed to check in, probably should look and figure out how you can deliver that information and anticipate when people need it so that that cuts down on your customer service calls to the office.
Absolutely. And something that we've really recommended, and I know that not everyone has the ability to do this, but go stay in a short-term rental in a place that you've never been before. And it'll
Mhm.
be a very eye-opening
Oh,
experience.
yeah. Yeah.
You'll learn some things. we went this summer over to Sicily, and booking some short-term rentals in that area is
Oh,
very different.
yeah, I bet.
We had a great experience, but something that was really it hit us as odd at first is every single one of our hosts met us at the property.
I
Oh,
So
remember you
wow.
talking about that.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's
they
so neat.
messaged us,
Yeah.
and it had to do with they needed to take register our passports to make sure that we were supposed to be there, because that's connected to their license. But at first it was like, they want to meet us? Like, can't they just send us a door code? Like,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's a lot of companies I know, especially in like 30A, that they do that, that they go and they meet the guests when they're checking in. And honestly, I don't know what the right way to do that is. I think the intent on that is to deliver and have that face-to-face experience, since guests aren't having to come to a front desk to check in anymore. But I feel like it should be optional, that I guess can select if they want that, because sometimes, I mean, you've been driving, like, "I don't wanna see anybody right now." Like, I wanna get in
Yeah.
the house, I wanna get
Yeah.
unpacked, like,
I'm dressed in my
going up.
my pajamas still or whatever. But
Yeah,
30A
yeah.
is a whole different thing, and that was the big topic at this event that we went to, was the Atlanta, people coming down and like the parties and those type of things. So I think it's like each management company has to feel that one out for themselves. But I think, like, talking about your end of the year audit and things, and of course, like, my side of the coin is always like on the distribution side. So I recommend everybody do exactly the same thing, but on the exterior, on the distribution, and like, look at what worked, look at what didn't work. What else is out there? I mean, you talk to, again, at Next Packs, we have 150 plus channels that we can offer. Now, do they all work for everybody? Absolutely not. But can I sit down with you and look at your market and say, like, strategically, which ones you should add to your mix to maybe get another one or two reservations in these shoulder periods? And I think that people just look at, oh, there's only Airbnb or VRBO, or there's, like, they're just looking at the solid ones that have supported them for a long time, but then they're suffering from the, I'm only getting all my reservations from these two channels, and they're like, how do I wean off? Well, the way to wean off is to diversify and have more of it. So right now, while it's slow and you're in this shoulder period, it's a really good time to sit down with either your channel manager or your channel partner rep, or even, if they have a Rebecca, they have a revenue manager, like, sit down and really look at that. And again, to the point of the guest communication flow, it's that flow of reservations. Like, where can you plug in the different channels for the different pieces of your calendar that make the most sense? And I don't think that people are using the channels as strategic as they could.
absolutely, I agree. Because you think about these big brands, you've got the Expedia brands and Marriott brands, and now, some of the other credit cards are getting into this space, and it's like their marketing budget is a lot more than probably what your marketing budget is on a very extreme level. So let them market for you. Take advantage of that. We've talking, a very common point that we have this time of the year is it's not about creating demand. If I could create demand, I would probably not have to work because I could sell that very, very easily, but it's all about creating interest. And if you are kind of in that softer time of demand, like Annie was saying, like, getting a couple bookings on Google is great. Like, that's added revenue, whether, or whatever channel it may be, a whim stay, filling in those gaps in those calendars at this time of the year. I mean, yes, we all want them to come directly, but the reality of it is, for many markets, people are on these OTAs and they're searching. And so if your price is right and they're converting, let's go. Like, let's get them booked.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, of not creating demand, it's about creating interest, and I agree to a certain point, but I will say this, that I remember there was a conversation years ago with one of the companies I worked with, that they said we shouldn't worry as much about trying to create demand, like, it's already there or it's out of our control, and we should just be manipulating it basically with the rates and how we do things. Like, not exactly. So, I mean, the demand is gonna ebb and flow with the destination and what some of the higher powers are doing to promote the destination. But it is your responsibility to create the demand that's going to focus on you and not your competitor, right? And then, and this, we talk about this all the time, why revenue and marketing really need to work together, because just dropping your rates is not going to get you bookings. I mean, maybe it will, but like, that, is that a sustainable business model? Absolutely not. If you want to be increasing revenue, of course that makes no sense. So the sweet spot is being able to, really capitalize on your list and your avenues and channels that you have to be able to create that demand within at least your own ecosystem. And then the rates are complementary to that, that hopefully they're priced right so that they don't go and look on another site and you created the demand, but somebody else benefited from it,
Yeah,
right?
it's
It's a
it's the old share shift, like there's always a bit of share coming into the market. Like unless your market is absolutely one of those that shuts down for reasons of like there are markets that absolutely have to shut down in the middle of winter or summer, whatever. There's always going to be somebody coming into the market. Now, do you want the guy that's always stayed at the Motel 6 to stay at your 5 bed? No, probably not. Like that's a different customer. But there is demand coming to the market. And as long as you make yourself available on the most sites possible, you can price it any way you want to get that. But it's about actually, Alex, you're spot on. I mean, there's demand. It's about you harnessing that demand for the
harnessing it.
benefit.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
exactly.
benefit of you. So it's share shift from your competitors. But I think, Rebecca, like what you said earlier, like using yourself as a benchmark instead of using your neighbor as a benchmark is really, really where you have to start fundamentally.
Absolutely. And it's knowing your home and knowing that, if you have a minimum price of $150, that's kind of what the owner said, hey, anything less than that, it doesn't make sense for me to rent. If you're sitting here for the next, 3 months at $150 and you're looking at your market occupancy at 10%, you don't have a pricing issue. You have a demand issue. So that's where leaning in to kind of see what the market is doing. Is the market picking up and you're not? Because you might have that owner that wants to put that at $500 a night and the market's all sitting at 150 open as well. Having that really brutal conversation of that owner going down to 450, is that going to make them get a booking?
No.
Maybe
Yeah.
not. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's tough because we always say, no, it's not going to, and then they get a booking and it's like, oh, great.
Yeah.
Right.
I told you
But
so.
other times it's like that owner, then we do get them down to $200 a night. They don't get a booking and then they're still upset. So it's knowing what's actually happening in your market, knowing when to have those conversations where it's like, hey, the market is picking up. The market's booked. We're holding a little too high. I think if we get this down $20 or $25 a night, we could probably get it booked. I think that's where, as property managers, this is what they pay us to do, to have those conversations. And at the end of the day, I can put my head on the pillow and know that I did everything possible to get that home booked. If that owner has those expectations that are too high for market value, it's not a loss to me. It's we tried, and maybe next year we will be able to have a better conversation of what are your realistic expectations for the summer, and can we set those rates appropriately now so that we don't sit empty. And so that's coming full circle to those owner conversations. I know we keep coming back to that, but it really is so important, because owner retention is also, something that it's not just losing owners, but you think about how much money goes into owner turn. Like
Oh,
that is
yeah.
a
Gosh, yeah.
very scary exercise to do, what it actually costs to onboard a new property, and then for them not to stay with you a full year to get that money back. Like, oh, that's so heart-wrenching.
Yeah, I mean, the time that you're putting in when you're making nothing essentially up front, yeah, labor intensive. Well, before we go, Rebecca, if there was one thing that you think property managers should be thinking about, it's, end of or early September at this point, what do you think they should be thinking about before the end of the year, and what should they do? If you had to pick one thing.
Yeah, I think it's really sitting down with your data. We all know how to put filters on to make ourselves feel better about
Yeah.
where we're actually at, just how we get mad at social media
Yep.
influencers for putting filters on their pictures to make them not look like reality. Like, we got to take
Yeah.
the filters off,
Yeah.
be a little
Yeah.
natural. But look at the data through transparency. And it feels overwhelming, but there's people out there like our team, and there's other some consultants in the industry that will help you walk through that. Let's look at what went right and what went wrong, because the people that have already set their rates well for 2025 are seeing really good pace right now.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
they're getting
so
those early
there's
wins, yeah.
nothing better than having owners have money on the calendar for 2025, that it's guaranteed that they're going to stay with you through that, for the most part. So it's really diving into your data, and it's not a one size fits all. Unfortunately, it's well, we bought a pricing tool and it's supposed to price and it's supposed to do all these things. At the end of the day, it is just a tool. It's just a tool.
And people have to operate tools, so
Yeah. Yeah.
hopefully don't have a tool operating the tool, but
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, no tools over here. Uh, but it is going through it unit by unit and having those, moments of wins and losses. Like, okay, maybe you missed the mark this year. That's okay. We don't need to sit in it and wallow. We need to take steps forward. And what does that look like? We talk about revenue management strategy a lot, but people, are like, well, yeah, we have a revenue management strategy. We have a dynamic pricing tool. And it's like, that's not your strategy. Like, that's your tool. Your tool and your strategy have to coexist together. And you have to sit on top of that, and you need to be the human element, the market expert, the person that knows the big events that are happening in your area. The all of that goes into it. So it's really rolling your sleeves up this time of the year and getting into the data and knowing when to ask for help. It doesn't mean that you're inadequate asking for help. I love the role we have because we're not emotionally invested in this. We don't know these owners, so we don't know kind of the relationships. We get a very, Switzerland look at everything where it's just kind of like, hey, this worked, this didn't. Well, we really love this owner and we really, didn't want to tell them. And it's like, okay, well, we have to have that hard conversation, or so it is really leaning on those people or things that can help you look at your data and how to set it up correctly. And so it's that time of the year, it's that time where you're just reevaluating everything, whether it's your revenue management strategy, to your PMS stack, to your tech stack, like all of those things. As we're kind of going in and we know if things are a little bit tighter this year, like you're gonna have to make money to have all those things, or you're going to have to trim down some things. So our team's definitely here to help. If you need to kind of have those conversations, we love it, and that's what we enjoy
revenue
doing.
therapy. I think it's
Yeah,
revenue
we
therapy more
do.
than management,
We tell
honest.
that all the time. I tease Ben. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to college and get my
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
your
degree.
right
therapist
at
license,
We
sure.
are. Half of our revenue
Yeah.
calls are always, especially this time of the year, because everyone's kind of feeling the tiredness, and I'm like, it's okay, and because all of our whole team has been sat on the property management side, so we understand. Someone was saying, oh, we just found out a balcony is going to be closed for the next 3 months, and I'm like, oh,
Right,
I know
yeah.
exactly how that feels. You have to
Yeah,
have those
yeah.
tough conversations with people that have booked, months in advance coming. So it's definitely, I'm very big advocate of therapy and being able to talk to someone, because this industry, it's great, but it is, some days are real crazy, and you need to kind of talk to people about it.
If somebody wants to book a therapy session with you,
Yeah.
what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can email Rebecca at revenresearch.com. We're on LinkedIn, or our website, revenresearch.com. We've got a contact us form. So our team will be at Favor coming up. We'll be at International. We'll be at DARM. We're going on the road for
We're on
conference
the road.
season.
We're all on
Yeah.
the circuit
Like,
now.
here we
Sure.
go. But it's so great because we get to see all of our friends, and it's always fun where you're like, oh, I don't get to just sit behind a Zoom. I get to like hang out with
Yeah,
real
actually be in
people.
person. Well, we're super excited to see you and get to see you multiple times coming up, and I know our audience will be excited to see you, meet you if they haven't met you before, but in the meantime, if anybody wants to get in touch with Annie and I, you can go to alexandanniepodcast.com, and until next time, thanks for tuning in, everybody.